everything from the financial plan through to grazing infrastructure. Just from an IFAC perspective, we have a presence across the region: Athenry, Ball, Roscommon, Sligo and Raphoe. I head up food and agribusiness. I also do a little bit of contract rearing of dairy heifers in Roscommon. And I'm joined by Dara Killeen, who started dairy farming last year and has a really good, interesting story to tell. Vincent Griffith, who is the farm profitability specialist with Aurivo. My own colleague Philip O'Connor, head of farm support, and Noreen Lacey, who's head of business development with IFAC, but also a banking specialist with many, many years experience in banking. Or not that many, but many years nonetheless. So the first thing we're going to do is, Dara, have we got Dara here? We do?
Yeah, here.
Dara, we're going to just have a look at 3 photos from your farm, and you might just, while we look at the photos from your farm, just give us a flavour of what you're doing, how many cows you're milking, how you got on when you started.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's just some of the facilities we've put in place. So this is our 2nd year milking. We milked last year 95 cows, and we ramped it up this year. We're milking 153. It was traditionally a sheep and beef farm, so it would have been beef cattle rather than sucklers, and ewe production or lamb production. So we kind of phased that out and began milking in 2019. So again, that's our 20-unit milking parlour. We have a crossbred herd. It's actually a high EBI crossbred herd, spring calving. So that's Perfect. It really, yeah.
So focused on crossbreeding, spring milking and new entrant last year. So you have an interesting story to tell for the participants on this call. And as we go through the webinar, we'll get plenty of insights from you. So let's start it off. Why would you go dairy farming? Why would you want to look at these girls 365 days a year and enjoy them? Philip O'Connor, I'll bring you in first. Why would you go dairy farming? How would you make that decision?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for, like, and I suppose, like, I mean, I'll deal with, suppose, the financial aspect of it first, like, and look, as has been shown in our own farm report this year and numerous reports, industry reports, dairy is the most profitable primary farming industry in this country, if you know what I mean. So if you're from a profit perspective, if you're looking at the profitability of the 4 main sectors, dairy, beef, sheep and tillage, dairy is the most profitable sector. So a lot of farmers who look at converting, it's profit, it's the ability to make a full-time income from it, it's the ability to have possibly 2 generations working on the farm to bring a son or daughter home. So from a financial aspect, that will be one of the key reasons.
Vincent, what are you seeing around the region? The guys and girls that have come into dairy farming in the past 4 or 5 years, what's motivating them?
Well, exactly what Philip has said, like the ability is the most profitable sector, so the ability to generate an income for their family, is a big driver can be that 2nd generation coming onto the farm, and a lot of people want to farm full time. Like, guys are doing a good job and stuff like that. Well, they could be on the suckler side, they have to work off farm, and sometimes that's tough in terms of work-life balance, like where you're working and then you have 50 or 60 suckler cows at home. That takes a lot of time too, and if you convert to dairy and maybe milk 80 to 100 cows, you can have a much better work-life balance and be rewarded for your efforts in a better way. And that's what we're seeing a lot of in the co-op. They're the type of farms joining the co-op. And, like, to be honest, a lot of guys are very successfully converting. They're seeing their neighbours have done it already. So it's becoming normalised, I'd say, in the region that guys can convert successfully to dairy farming.
Dara, you've done it. Work-life balance is mentioned there. Profitability is mentioned. What was the key drivers for you?
I guess it was profitability, really. We were working fairly hard where we were. So, like, some people say, oh, you go dairy farming, you're going to be tied to the milking parlour. It's not really the reality. And it allowed me to stay at home full time. We had a farm of a scale that I felt it should be able to keep 2 families going, and by converting to dairy farming, it's enabled us to do that. So I guess it's taken away the need for me to go and look for a job away from the farm, or it just allows us to focus fully on it. Yeah.
And you made it. We had a chat yesterday in preparation for today. You made a comment that you collected your child from school yesterday afternoon. That it gives a serious flexibility.
It does, yeah. I guess there's a lot more structure. As in, if you milk your cows twice a day, there's not much else that is vital to be done in that day. So, like, we generally try and work whatever 6:30 to 5:30, and if it's not done at 5:30, you just do it the next day. So
yeah.
Whereas I felt with the dry stock, probably wasn't that same structure. And I think it's just the milking. And if you say that you're going to finish at milking time in the evening, that's it. And also the fact, milking cows, you can get a guy in and train him to milk cows. So it's very easy to get that help in. Whereas in a dry stock background, it's a bit more complicated, different groups of stock, different treatments. It's harder to give clear instructions that if you go away, you can just switch off.
Noreen, you're dairy farming and you're working off farm as well at the same time.
Yeah, I was looking for punishment, but yeah, I have 4 kids now. I say it's the only reason I had them was just so that they can come and help me out in the farm. They're getting to an age now where they're actually beginning to pay their way, so it's great. It can be done, and I suppose we came from a small setup. It was a small farm, and we expanded it. Myself and my husband are both doing it together, and we both work off farm. So look at it, it can be done, and it's enjoyable. You know, when it's tough going in the springtime, all right, but it can be enjoyable. It's a good lifestyle. I suppose there's a bit of lifestyle too for family lifestyle. You know, I know there's the profitability side of it, but it's a great lifestyle to bring kids up on as well. Give them a good work ethic. Send them off in the morning with the cows.
I often hear you talking about when you're reseeding and how the four of them be out picking stones, and I'm just not sure if they'd share that view. But look, we move on. So you've agreed on why, and now it's really about what are the top priorities. You want to do it. You want it for the work-life balance. You want it for the profitability. What are the important questions? So Philip, these are 3 questions that you'd often ask clients when they come in and are thinking about it. Where are we? Where do we want to be? And how do we want to get there? Talk through this.
Well, I suppose, again, I'll focus on the financial aspect. So, like, I mean, we're going to go through this as we speak through this seminar, like, but I mean, there's a significant capital cost about going into dairy farming. So, in other words, analysing where you are financially at the moment. In other words, where's the farm financially at the moment? And then where do we want to be? Like, and then we've dealt a bit of that with the why, like, as regards, so you want to be a dairy farmer, you want to milk X amount of cows. So in other words, that you have a vision or a goal. And then how do we get there then from a financial aspect? Then how do we bridge that gap as regards, we now need to invest in stock, we need to invest in capital, we need to do X amount of stuff. How do we get there? It doesn't just happen overnight. In other words, there has to be a plan in place about the stepping stones to get to the point that you want. And I know, David, you've often talked in different things about setting your goals. So it's setting the plan out and how are you going to do it?
Yeah, and I work with SMEs an awful lot, and these questions are just as pertinent for an SME environment as it is for a farm environment. Vinny, are potential new entrants in the Aurivo region asking these questions and putting in the effort to do the planning?
They are, like, I mean, like as Philip said, it's not something that can be done. Like, we're all for reducing the capital cost to get in, but there is a significant capital cost no matter how you do it. So you have to have a very clear plan, and like we deal with everyone in the co-op, from guys that are just thinking about it to guys that are definitely going to get in. And like the guys that are definitely going to get in, they have to, the farm side that are going to get in, they have to be this clear about stuff. They have to understand where they are financially, because they're going to have to go to the bank, they're going to have to draw down a significant amount of money. And also, it's a very large project, like, and Dara might comment on this, like, the amount of work that's involved in converting a farm, be it the capital construction, sourcing stock, dealing with credit and stuff like that, that takes an awful lot of time. So you have to be very clear about your goals and very clear about how you're going to achieve it.
Dara, you mentioned that it was 2 years between you guys doing the planning, executing on the plan, and then starting to milk. You thought about this fairly deeply.
Yeah, I guess if I rewind back to the start, I had joined the dry stock knowledge transfer groups, and it was just through working with my Chagas advisor on that front. He was saying to me, maybe I should look at it. He saw there was probably a bit of technical ability there, and I guess that was a starting point for us. But we definitely spent probably 6 months to a year. We actually did a farm transfer at the same time. We set up a registered farm partnership. We went to the banks. Well, we drew up our business plan first. We went to the banks. We got in touch with Vinny and the co-op. We bought stock in the autumn of 17, put them in calf in May 18 and milked them in 19. And let's say then in 2018, we had everything lined up. We had all our ducks in a row and we started our building in 19. So it was kind of a year planning, a year building, and then we built from there with the milking herd.
So not a quick job. You need to put the time in, and it takes us nicely to your farm's business plan. Noreen, talk to us a little bit about the business planning piece.
Okay, from a bank perspective, preparation is key here. It's really important that you put the time in to sit down and plan it out. Take a long-term view of where the farm wants to go. You may only want to put in a parlour with 12 units now, but maybe you build it so that there's extra capacity to put in units, and allow for expansion at a cheaper cost later on. It could be that you allow to put in an extra 3 spans onto the parlour, or onto a slatted shed later on as well. But that you have the planning in place, and maybe you put in the slats and infrastructure to allow for that. So I think it's key that you take a long-term view. You don't have to do it all into one go, but you prioritise what needs to be done from the start, and that's what your lending request is for. Be realistic then with your growth and your performance projections that are going into the plan. And I suppose, and to bear in mind that when the banks are looking at and doing budgets up, they will probably, most of them do it at 30 cents a litre. Most farmers will, when the bank is doing projections, allow for a milk solid bonus, but as a new entrant, you won't have that advantage. So you're really looking at 30 cents a litre flat with no advantage for your milk solid bonus, and some of them won't allow it until you have 2 or 3 years experience behind you. So factor that into your business plan as well. Make sure that you do sensitivity analysis on your business plan. So stress test your interest rates. It's fine to say you put in your interest rate to say 5% now, but make sure that if interest rates went up to another 2%, can the farm still repay it? Likewise with milk price, drop your 30 cents a litre to maybe to 28 by 2 cents to allow for some volatility on milk markets as well. I suppose one of the most key things that I see that goes wrong quite often for new entrants is around the costing. So there's not enough time spent coming to get pulling costs together, and preparing a detailed capex budget for the work that's going to be done, and then it runs over. And if that runs over the loan amount that you have, you end up building up creditors, merchant debt, and that's where issues start to come in. You start getting hardcore and overdraft limits and current accounts. So spend time, get an accurate costing of the work that's going to be done, and put in your contingency. Allow for an extra 10% or 20% on the contingency for that as well. And just, I suppose, one last thing, David, and is on the structure for the banks. When you're going, know exactly what sort of term you want to put your loan on. So if you're looking at an infrastructure loan, if you're doing parlours or buildings, they're usually over a 15-year term. If you're looking at doing machinery or breeding stock, that's over a 7-year term. So make sure that that's reflected in your business plan as well. And don't forget an interest-only option. It will take a bit of time to get cash flows up. Most banks will give 12 to 18 months interest only, and especially for a new entrant, they'll be willing to support that.
Okay. Vincent, from an Aurivo perspective, when new entrants come to you and they're developing their business plan, are you guys involved? How do you help?
Yeah, what I would say is very important, and again, going back to Dara, I'd say it's something he did really well. He put a team around him. So obviously, if you're thinking about getting into milk, come and talk to the co-op. We're obviously always looking for new entrants, and we want to help in any way. You need to build a team around you. So the co-op, like a good accountant for tax structures, and Teagasc are really important in this too as well. Like attending your local dairy discussion group, developing a good relationship with your Teagasc dairy advisor. They're the things that you need to have, because it is a big project. There's a lot of different skills required, and nobody has all the skills or all the knowledge. So it is important, and it's something we'd say when we do the initial visit. It's to put a good team around you so that you have support and knowledge for any of those questions that you might know the answer to. And as Noreen said there, you do need to take a long-term view, but it is it's a 20-year project. Realistically, you're getting into milk for the long haul. It's not something you're going to be able to get out of in 3 or 4 years. So you have to be very clear that it's something you want to do, that it's something the farm is going to be in for a long number of years. Because once the concrete is poured in the yard and the milking powder is in, you're not going to get that cash back out of that project. It's not like switching enterprises on the dry stock side. It is something you need to be very clear about at the start. And as I said, look, we've had loads of excellent, successful conversions. But I would say just be very sure you want to do it, and do take a long-term view of it. Like, it is a 20-year project.
Thank you. Dara, in terms of your business plan, you went to discussion groups before you started milking. You had a whole team around you from the co-op, accountancy, the whole lot. What were the challenges in putting the business plan together? What would you advise any of the new entrants that are listening on this call this morning?
Well, I guess before I went dairy farming, the biggest money I ever owed anyone was probably a student overdraft of €700. So, I mean, when you go and you're looking for 6 figures or whatever it is, like, it takes a while to get your head around that. And I guess if I did my own business plan, I would have done it on a lot smaller scale, possibly for a 100 cow herd, a smaller parlour, smaller infrastructure. And I got in touch with the Dairy Expansion Service and Patrick Owing. And I guess he helped me to see the bigger picture. And it's like Noreen said, while we didn't do everything on day one, we planned for it. And the money we spent, we did the 20-unit milking parlour, so that's future-proofed. It's just getting your head around the figures. But then going back on the business plan, we costed everything very well, and we didn't actually go over budget. And the business plan was done kind of conservatively with milk price and output. And we put in a higher bank payment than we would be paying. So on paper, we knew it would work. And when we saw that, it kind of gave us a bit of belief in it.
Okay. I heard our own CEO speaking on radio there recently, Philip, and he said, make your mistakes on paper. And I guess you're using FarmPro, a software tool that IFAC has to help people business plan and to help new entrants cash flow plan into the medium term. Maybe just talk through that for a second.
Yeah, make your mistakes on paper, I suppose. Like, I mean, actually, everyone has touched on it a bit there. Like, I mean, it's, by doing the business plan and doing the figures out on paper and looking at them, you can see the pinch points. You can see the areas that are going to be where the cash is going, where the cash shortfalls will be. Noreen touched on it there about the stressing. Like, it's not the bank that needs to do the stressing, you need to do the stressing yourself. In other words, what you'll be calling the what if scenarios. What if this happened? What if that happened? And let's be honest, we're in 2020 in COVID. So that's the ultimate what if. Like, so by putting the figures down and looking at the figures and analysing the figures, and it's not just a case of doing the business plan and putting it in a drawer and never looking at it again. It's about taking that business plan and converting it into a budget and saying, right, so I did plan that I was going to do this. Did that happen? Why didn't it happen? Because it never will happen. Things change. But by you analysing your business plan and converting it into a budget and working towards that budget, you can make the proper decisions at the right time. So when things do happen, that you can go, right, so I can adjust here, I can go there. In Noreen's past career as a banker, she likes when people come to them when they know the problem is coming rather than after the problem has happened. So in other words, that if you can see through your budget that there's an issue coming down the tracks, you can go to your bank and they're much more receptive when you can anticipate problems and you need an injection of cash into the business, that if you anticipate the problem rather than you're rocking into the bank and you go, yeah, I underestimated my capital expenditure and my cash flow has gone short, or there was a drought and my feed bill has gone up, in other words, and the wheels have proverbially come off the account. So this is really important to monitor the cash. And as a new entrant, cash is going to be phenomenally tight. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit, but cash is so tight, so you just have to be so careful with it and manage it.
Okay. Noreen,
David,
do you agree? Yeah.
Just one point on that before you leave, and it was a great piece of advice somebody gave me along the way, was you're going to run out of money at some point. And when you run out, you want to have the important things done. So it's really about tailoring what you, like, prioritizing your spend.
Dara, did you, just when you talk about running out of cash at some stage, did you keep a few bullocks around the place just in case that day came?
Well, I suppose what we did, and it's kind of farm specific, but a lot of our land is away from home, so we phased out our cattle. Every time we sold or finished cattle, we bought weaning and heifers, but we kept the sheep enterprise ticking over on the side, and that was a great cash reserve for us. And even up to the tail end of last year, we were still selling lambs, and it just gave us a boost. Like, there was no real pressure when we had that in the system. Yeah.
It's a nice little tip though, because most people will be converting from probably a suckler or sheep enterprise, and just in that first year when maybe cash is exceptionally tight, having some stock around the place at that pinch point might be helpful. We talk about structure a lot in IFAC. The benefits of structure, Philip, and how can structure, your farm business structure, bring benefits to the farm enterprise?
Well, it's very important, like, because you want to have the business structure that works for the business, if you know what I mean. And there's two sides to this, like, and actually Darren, in fairness, touched on it, because they've done both. So you want to have the business structure that allows the business to grow and work for the day-to-day running the business, and you also need the business structure to allow for succession. So when you are looking at doing a new entrant, like, you do need to look at the business structure. So what structure are they in? A lot of farms are sole traders. So, like, for example, you might want to look at the RFP. There's going to be capital investment. So, in other words, to maximise the double TAMs, which is coming to an end actually at the end of this year. You might need to look at company option, if you know what I mean, depending what your tax situation are. Some people, companies are not just necessarily for large-scale farmers. You can, depending on how your own personal taxes are, your spouse and so forth. So you might want to look at some option that. And then the overriding thing that should always be looked on farms is succession. Where's the long-term farm? So having the structure in place to allow two generations to work on the farm, if that's the case, and to allow the younger generation to take over the farm, if you know what I mean. So succession should be there to work for the business, if you know what I mean. And it is important to get the right structure. And structures change. So you can grow through the structures, if you know what I mean. We would have many farms that start off as sole traders, go into partnerships, go into registered farm partnerships, end up in companies, come back into hybrids of companies and partnerships. So structure is it evolves and grows with the business and works for the business, which is the important thing.
Darry, you made a lot of changes to the structure of your family farm when you converted.
Yeah, David, I guess it came at the right time for me, to be honest. My dad was kind of at the point where he was happy enough to pass over the reins. So we did it all in one clean sweep, and it was a good time to do it. And it was good for the bank too, they were kind of happier to be lending to a younger person rather than to an older generation. So we did it all at that one point, and it did add a lot of pressure and hidden costs of business. It added a lot of legal fees also, like, so, you know, you really have to factor that in. But then once it's done, you move on.
Vincent, do you see an emphasis on structure around the region when you're dealing with new entrants? Or is it something that's putting the long finger and people say, oh, I want to think about the shed now rather than the structure?
I think the TAMS grants have been a big part of making people think about structures, because, like, the double grant is a huge help to farms. Like, Joe, where you are in a farm partnership with two generations, there's a lot of money there that can be brought in and can seriously reduce the amount of capital spent. So that has made farmers think a bit more about it. As a rule, I think all farms should be definitely thinking about succession a lot more, maybe, because, like, from time to time you do see where succession goes badly. Like, we have a great example of where it's done well with Dara, but there are other cases where maybe it's not thought about enough and it's not thought about in time. Like, and look, from the co-op perspective, we've every different type of structure in the co-op. Like, we have sole traders, partnerships, limited companies, and there's no problem. Like, we try to make sure our suppliers are in the right structure for them. Like, so we'd always be advocating to go back and talk to yourselves to make, because the structures do change. We see that in the co-op as well, like that farms that are sole trader, and I suppose the tax implications too, as businesses grow. Like, there can be a huge tax bill there if you're in the wrong structure. So we are seeing a lot more of the larger herds definitely converting to limited companies.
Yeah, especially when the capital allowances run out. Laurie, structure in terms of a banking context. Does the bank mind what type of structure it's in? Do they have a preference?
Not really, David. Like, I mean, they're as happy to lend to a sole trader as they are to a limited company. But if you go back to what Dara was saying, that, you know, its age can sometimes be the limiting factor. So if it's somebody in their late 50s, 60s looking to convert to dairy at that stage, they may not get the term that they require to make the plan work. So they may have to bring in maybe a next generation and form the partnership so that they get the term on the loan. So really, limited companies can increase the repayment capacity. So where there's a large amount of expansion going, you have to reduce tax to 12.5%. So it can make the structure more profitable. So, you know, that's an advantage. But on a case-by-case basis, you know, a bank will assess that, you know, a sole trader, limited company, you know, every entity or every structure will work, but just depends on your own individual circumstances.
Nori, following up on that, you're going into the bank, you've got your good business plan done, you've a sensible plan. Anything else they're looking for? Any sort of tips for our listeners?
Well, I suppose just in terms of even documentation of what they're looking for, I'll quickly go down through it. I suppose you'll need a copy of your Department of Agriculture payment statement. If it's a new bank and it's you know, a bank that you're not with, they'll want to see 6 months bank statements, 6 months loan statements, have a listings of your creditor debtors, what money is owed to you, whether it be from cattle sales or whatever, and what money you owe out, whether it's to vets, merchants, have that listed. Have the details of your land owned and leased, and if you're operating on leased lands, have details of the lease schedule, the term of the leases, and how much is done. It's also useful then just to have a kind of a listing of the stock details for the bank as well, what stock you have on hand and the value of that stock if you're going to sell that stock to and use it to purchase dairy stock. So that's just in terms of the criteria. But I suppose in terms of tips, David, just to be organised, have as much information ready, because what happens is you go to the bank, you meet them, you have half the information that they require, they send you back to get the rest of it, and it just drags and it becomes a very long, drawn-out process. The borrower, the farmer kind of loses a little bit of momentum, and the bank does as well. So it's better just to have it all together and get it done, get it sent to credit, get the approval in place in a tighter frame, if possible.
Dara, thank you, Noreen. Dara, you good experience with the banks? You got 2 offers in the end.
Yeah, David, I suppose the contact
Always the magic.
Banks. Well, there was no magic. It's like Anton, it's accumulation of all the small things you do right. And it was another piece of good advice somebody gave me was I had stock on the ground when the bank came out to view the farm. So I could show them the EBI. I could say that whatever's on that business plan, these are going to do more than it. We had an awful lot of stock on hand. I guess since I returned home, we just kind of built up stock. We didn't put much money into the yard and concrete or anything. We just put our money into stock. So we had a massive amount of stock to sell. Basic payment is a factor, whether you like it or not. If you have some form of a basic payment, it's a strength. And I guess your ability too, like if you can, it's not all about paper. Like if you can get the bank out on the farm, show them technically you're going to be able to do what you say you'll do, they will take that into consideration. But like, again, if you do that and your figures aren't good, so it's a combination of everything really.
But have been organised, and that stock on the ground is an interesting point. Philip, any thoughts on the banking side?
Yeah, Dara touched on it there. Like I've done lots of business plans with new entrants and young farmers. But the paper is paper at the end of the day, like, and when the bank do come out, they are taking a level of a punt with the person, if you know what I mean. So it is important that new entrant is able to demonstrate their knowledge and their confidence that they understand what they're doing and how they're going to do it, if you know what I mean. So, like I always say to the young new entrants, and I go out to them and say, look, there's no point me answering the questions for the bank. You need to understand your business plan. You need to be able to show that you know how to run this business and where you're going to go in it. And I say Dara touched on it very well there. Like, so it is important. It's all those small things and bring them all together and giving the bank the confidence.
Sorry. Just one thing, if I could just come in on that, I didn't call out, I suppose, really, it was just if you're already in dairying and maybe you're looking at going into a second unit, one bit of advice I'd say there is like, better before bigger. If you're not doing the figures right on the farm at the moment, if you're not achieving your milk solids, and grass growth potential, you're not going to do it on a second farm. So get it right first on the home farm before you look at expanding. That's key, and a bank will always go back to the home farm figures and have a look at the details there. So better before bigger.
Okay, Vincent, bring you in now. Capital, what to invest in? So as you said earlier, it's a 20-year investment. You've got bank funding. What's your decision-making process at that point?
Yeah, like it's about prioritizing that money you have, because it's going to be, everyone's going to have a budget or a finite amount of money to spend. They're not going to have no blank checkbooks when you're getting in. So it's about investing in high return areas. So like very basically that's your grassland and your stock, two hugely important areas to spend well on those. And then obviously to put in good facilities like Dara has for harvesting the milk and winter housing. But like you can overspend in the milking parlour. You can spend an extra 30,000-40,000 in the milking parlour putting in gadgets that have a very, very poor return on investment. And that money would be better spent developing your paddocks or grazing infrastructure and buying very good stock. Like if you just look at Dara as an example, like Dara's herd will be in the top 2% of EBI in the co-op, so a very high EBI herd. Last year, Dara got 38.3 cents for his milk. The co-op average was 33.8. So he was nearly 5 cents above the co-op average for his milk price for the year. And you've got to remember too as well, those stock are the foundation stock going forward. So you're breeding from a much higher platform or a much higher base than if you buy bad stock. And unfortunately, we have had new entrants that maybe haven't put the time into purchasing stock and spending the time to go and buy the very, very good high EBI stock. And like they're basically 3 or 4 steps behind a farm that puts the effort into stock.
Vincent, if you decide to go milking 80, 90 cows, right?
Yeah.
By investing in high quality EBI stock, what would be the top line revenue return on those stock as opposed to buying run of the mill average stock?
Like, I would say you're looking at at least 3 cents a litre difference in milk price between high EBI stock and the average stock that's around. And like every 3 cents on 100,000 litres supplied is 3,000 euros. Like, so, you know, very quickly you can get up into 15,000-20,000 euros difference in your milk check purely on a genetic thing. Like if you did everything else the same, it's just genetics that are differentiating the stock. Like, and you do have to spend time sourcing stock. Like I think maybe Darryl will come in a minute and how he went about buying stock, but it is something that takes time. You have to be prepared to walk away from stock like that aren't suitable, and definitely you have to put in the time. If you're just going to buy all the stock that you see first, I mean, you're going to end up with an average herd of cows, like which is like it's going to hold back the business for a long time to come.
I'm going to come back to stock in a second. Philip, you cannot do it all on day one. So when you're making those investments in the early years, given that there will be cash constraints, how do you advise dairy farmers and new entrants to go about that?
Well, usually, as I say, when I'm talking to farmers, I'm usually putting together the business plan as regards to go to the bank, if you know what I mean. So I often work from the bottom of the page up. So I sit down, we look at what the financial position of the farm is today, where we feel we can get over the next 2 to 3 years, and we basically work out a budget. In other words, so we sit down and we say, look, the farm can carry 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, whatever the number that we feel is a comfortable level for the farm to cover. You would always put a contingency. So you'd always build in a contingency in that. And then it's a case then of cutting your cloth to measure. And as Vinny says there, right, so you don't have a blank check. So you've got a budget of, we'll say 120,000. How are you going to maximize that budget, that amount of money spend to work the business? Because the first couple of years are so cash intensive, if you know what I mean. Like, I mean, if you're borrowing for stock, you have to borrow from over short term, 5 to 7 years. So you can't over borrow, because it will just hoover up so much cash, like, and which can put the business under pressure. So when you do know what your capital investment is going to be, then how do you best allocate that? And that's where Vinny comes in, and the tax advisors come in and goes, right, so how do we plan and how do we work this budget to the best? What I would do then is, especially on the new entrants where money is tight, like, and we put in our contingency, like, and to the point of annoyance with some of our clients, I'd be saying, look, you just have to stay in budget. You just cannot go over budget. Just the cash is not in the system. So like you do have to be strict with it, if you know what I mean. And as you say, Vinny said, you can't do it all at once. So there is a level of hardship sometimes with new entrants those first couple of years. I think Dara might touch on a bit of it. I don't think he cubic is the first year, Dara, if I remember rightly.
So talk to us about the hardship, Dara.
Well, we tried to limit it anyway. But I guess going back to business plan, we wrote down everything we would like to have. And then it comes back to what you must have. And you tailor your budget to that then. So, and also going back to the bank also, they want you to prove that you're going to put your money into it as well, not just their money. So I suppose at that point we started Reseeding the Farm, which is your greatest return on your investment. So it's like Vinny would have mentioned how to harvest the milk, but how to harvest the grass. So we put money into roads and reseeding early on, and a milking parlour, because that enables you to milk the cows. So we had no cubicles the first year. They went in at the tail end of our first year for our second winter. So I guess we put them on slats, we limed slats, we calved them on bedded sheds, and we just were lowly stocked the first year, and we got out to grass early on. So you make it work, like, but I mean, you have to always remember the long-term goal, and like there'll be short-term pain, but just like we're in a great position now at the minute where we are, but I mean, it wasn't always easy to get here.
Okay, I'm going to keep the spotlight on you. When you're looking to purchase heifers, you lease some heifers and you operate it in a few different ways. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, I guess there's no one size fits all, and it depends on your farm. And just on our particular farm, when we had beef cattle finished, it didn't make any sense for us to go and buy more beef cattle. So for every finished animal, we were able to buy 2 weanling heifers that autumn. So I guess we could turn 50 bullocks into 100 heifers, which is what we did our first year. And we had this ground away from home. And again, back to facilities, rather than building a new shed or something like that, we kept our beef cattle in the shed and we outwintered our heifers on rapes. It was low cost. Then that ground was put into grass after the rapes. So, you know, it was all part of the system. And we absorbed the cost of rearing them via our sheep enterprise. So we weren't too worried if we made money for ourselves. We just put everything back into that. So there was no draw on the farm, really. But we've done that every year since 2018. We've bought weanlings in the back end. It's just part of what we've done. I find that there's a greater selection of animals at that age. Kind of if they're good enough, they're going to be sold as a calf or as a weanling. So I just found there was a better choice, and you could buy a bigger bunch. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be the same cost when they reach the milking parlour. It's kind of the same cost whether you buy it as a calf, as a weanling, as an in-calf heifer. So the first year we bought 103 weanlings, we milked 95. And then this year I had more weanlings coming through, and I got an option to lease in 30 heifers. So I knew where they were coming from. They were clean stock. There was no sickness. So I took them in on a 1-year basis, and it really helped us when we were interest only for the first 12 months. So then this year we were on capital and interest, and having them extra 30 heifers, it really helped us with coping with the increased bank payments this year, and especially in a year that was supposedly meant to be challenging with Brexit and with COVID. It was great to have that extra milk in the tank at a small enough cost.
Okay. Philip, you often talk about the cash flow impact of heifers.
Yeah, like, I mean, it was actually an interesting word that Tara used was the word absorb. So obviously he had accounted for this in his cash plan, and it is very important to account for that. So Dara bought them as weanlings, and therefore he had the cost to take them to the parlour, which was a number of months away. So I suppose the cash flow implication is the gap between when you pay for the animal, rearing the animal, versus when it makes you money. And not all farms can absorb that cost. I have seen new entrants where we had no option but to buy in calf heifers pretty close to when they were going to be calving down, because literally the cash wasn't in the system to carry the stock for that length of period. We've had farmers who have bought in cows when they started milking, reasonably high quality cows, if you know what I mean. It wasn't ideal, but they needed to get milk in the tank, because at the end of the day, it's the cow that's paying for everything, and it's the milk that comes out of that cow that's going to be the check that comes in your post in the door every month. Dara, a very interesting way that he did it, and I've seen a lot of people do that. Like, by leasing the animals, he's basically got those animals a year early. So therefore, the cash injection he's got is a year early for the cost of that lease. So the return of investment in those lease animals is high because he's getting cash in the bank into his farm, and that cash is being used to pay the capital payments. So I suppose it's like whether you rear the calf, buy it as a wheel and buys it in calf heifer, roughly speaking, the cost is not going to be, but the cash implications of that decisions will have an impact in the business. And I suppose it's not one size fits all. Some farmers do have to get up to stocking levels at a phenomenally quick rate because their capital repayments are such. Other farmers can ease into it more, but it's understanding what your farm needs and the cash, what the cash implications of the decision and how you buy and how you bring your stock into the farm. How is that going to affect your cash flows? And again, it comes back to the business plan and to budgeting. Can you do it? And as I say, Dara said, when the very first sentence, we were able to absorb it. Obviously, he'd done his maths on it, and he was able to absorb it. But the fact that he'd reviewed it and looked at it and made that decision, and it worked for him. It wasn't a case of, oh God, I can't absorb it, and now I run into cash problems and so forth. Like, so, again, it's the planning, it's the decision-making process.
Vincent, thoughts? You've mentioned buying stock and the importance of getting the right stock.
Yeah, like so I suppose there's two parts. Yeah, like in terms of getting really good genetics, that's the first part of it. But then you do have to plan out what the cost of keeping those stock is going to be like, and there needs to be a plan around that. What a lot of farms have done getting in, and as Dara said, there is no one size fits all. A lot of guys have just continued to farm in their dry stock business or their sheep business, and then in this time of year in September, if they're starting milk in the following February, they'll buy in calf heifers. Their own dry stock business has continued as normal for most of the year, and then when they're cashing out their suckler cows or yoke flock, they use that money to buy those in calf heifers, and they don't have the risk or the work of putting that stock in calf, and it works. It works well. That works very, very well, and they're closer to money, which is Philip's point that those stock you'll be getting a milk check in March from those heifers, so that can work quite well as well. It's probably the simpler option, but as Dara has shown, that there's other ways of doing it too.
Right, dear panelists, we've 10 minutes to go, so nice and tight answers now for the next 10 minutes at most. Grassland and grazing infrastructure, we've talked about this quite a bit. Look, it has to be right. Put in the roadways, reseed. Quick question, in terms of reseeding the year before you go milking, should you reseed the whole farm? Should you reseed part of the farm? What way should you work that? Go to you, Vincent.
I think it depends on what stocking rate you're going to carry. In fairness, a lot of the guys that are converting from the dry stock side have good quality pastures that are quite productive. A lot of them don't need reseeding. I definitely wouldn't say as a rule everyone should be reseeding all their farm. It depends on the quality of swards present on the farm, and as well as that, maybe the money should be spent on soil fertility first before you go reseeding. You might get a bigger bang for your buck. If you're not as highly stocked, like someone like Darren, maybe you don't need to reseed the whole farm and take on that full cash cost. And definitely, if you have good quality swards that are there already that have been reseeded, you shouldn't be reseeding.
Dara, I presume you're grass measuring critical part of the week.
Dave, we would have started that in 18, I suppose, just to get used to it. It didn't matter if you messed it up in 18, there was no cows milking, but it tried to give us a handle on what paddocks were growing grass, and we would have reseeded about 50% of the farm for our first year in milk. We didn't carry too heavy of a stocking rate, and then in 19 we had cash flow, so we were able to reseed the rest of it, and then that had us with about 80% reseeded this year, so we were able to ramp up the stocking rate. So and the thing about a lot of these new grass varieties, when you reseed them, you have to graze them well and you have to feed them with fertilizer. They just don't, they're not like the older pastures where you can kind of neglect them a bit and then they'll come again. So I would say don't do it until you're ready, because there is a cost to it, but it's a great return on your money, and all of our farmers reseeded and the cows are really, really returning well on it.
Brilliant. Do you use a quadrant or a plate meter?
I use a plate meter. It's synced to my phone. It goes straight onto pasture base. It's just, I do 115 acres in about 40 minutes. It's just simplicity. It's not always 100% accurate, but I mean, you're training your eye as you go too. So.
Okay. developing your dairy skill set, focus on you, Dara. You went to a couple of dairy discussion groups for, was it a year or 2 years before you started? Like,
we would have joined in 18, yeah. The local group were good enough to let me in, and they were good enough to show me their figures and all of that too, and there was huge encouragement. I mean, the first discussion group meeting I went to, we were talking about how to avoid a tax bill, and that was something I had never ever heard mentioned before at a discussion group. So, I mean, when you hear that, there must be something going right. Developing your dairy skills, yeah, I would have worked on dairy farms. I actually worked in New Zealand for a few months as well, but it was not on my radar at that time to go milking cows. I kind of aligned myself with a few good mentors. My cousin entered dairy farming just before me, so I would be ringing him the whole time. I'm in 2 or 3 discussion groups. I joined the Focus Farm program with Vinny there in Aurivo. I guess I wasn't afraid to ask questions. You know, if I didn't know the answer, I would ring someone that did, or I'd ring someone that put me on to someone else that knew. So it's that thing of not being afraid to ask someone, like, and be willing to learn as well.
because Vincent, it's a big deal to go from looking at a golden Charlie to looking at crossbred heifers. So what skills do guys need to learn and girls need to learn before they go dairying?
Yeah, I think Dara's point about mentors is really important. Someone that you can go and ask, that you have a good relationship with, a good progressive dairy farmer is really important. Like, I would strongly advise any new entrant to go and kind of get involved with a local dairy farmer, like, be that doing a few milkings every week, just to see if you actually like it, like, because some people don't like milking cows, like, and that's not a great start if you want to spend the next, 15 years paying back loans to milk cows. So do go and see if you like the rhythm of a dairy farm, get involved. In fairness, Teagasc have a lot of courses through the discussion groups, and they are running a new entrant course at the moment. I think it's starting in September, and there'll be one in our area. I think it'll be based in the Tuam office with Mike Donoghue. So I think Dara might have done that previously as well. So that's a really good thing to do as well, to have that new entrant course and go through everything in great detail. And yeah, like, connect yourself with good, positive people that you can go and ask questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. Ask plenty of questions. Ourselves, Teagasc, IFAC, there's loads of people there that want to help you. It's just a matter of going there and putting yourself out there.
Perfect. Vinny, talk to us a little bit about Aurivo. Like, if a new entrant rang you tomorrow, would you ever say, geez, we've no room in the inn for your milk?
No, like the co-op we are looking for new entrants. We see it as a really important part of our strategy going forward, that there's new entrants to milk coming into the co-op. Like any business, you need new blood and stuff like that coming in. So, like, it's something we're working, and we put structures in place to try and be as helpful as possible to any potential new entrants. So what I would say is give us a ring in the co-op. We've on our website there's a contact for potential new entrants. We want to organise a farm visit. We'll get out to see you. Tanker access is very important. It's actually a really crucial thing about where you put your dairy. Like, milk tankers are very big now. They have to be able to get in safely to yards, turn safely. So that is really important. Where you put your dairy is a really important consideration in your design process. All farms have to be Board B or STAS approved now at this stage. And in terms of actually sending us milk, there's a milk supply contract that will need to be signed, an animal health cert from the Department of Agriculture that all dairy farmers sign every year, and then a bank mandate. There's no actual physical milk checks anymore. Every farm will get a monthly return explaining their milk check, explaining their milk payment, but all money goes directly to your bank account. So I would say contact us early is the biggest thing, and, like, we'll be as helpful as we can in terms of getting you in. Like, I think, again, like, we're using Dara all the time, but that thing of getting involved with the industry through Teagasc, through your local discussion group, you'll pick up so much from just talking to existing dairy farmers. Okay,
I'm very conscious of the time. Conversion year, there is a cash squeeze. There's no two ways about that, and people have to be very conscious of that. And there'll be questions coming in. Financial potential. Philip, you've benchmarked here established dairy farmers, new dairy farmers in the past 3 to 5 years, and then very recent entrants in 1 or 2 years. Just give us a quick run through that table.
Yeah, look, Vinny was, as part of this, Vinny asked me to do it. Like, so, as I say, I've got a lot of our IFAC farmers, what we've nearly 3,500 dairy farmers in IFAC. So I pulled out a bunch of our new entrants, about 70 to 80 of them, and I just did a benchmarking group through our system. So they're raw enough data. I said I haven't delved down into massively, but I suppose what it shows is, and it's like any new business, the new entrants, the new recent ones that are they're only milking, some of them's only milking 1 year. There's about 15 in that group there, about half of them making 2 years, other half are in 1 year. So it's that first year, like, I mean, a heifer makes 75% of third lactation cow. So like, I mean, and your expenses and your learning. So like, it's not going to be, the money is not going to come flowing in year one. I mean, it's a learning, it's a growing process. Those cows that are there 3 to 5 years, they've expanded on, if you know what I mean. Their stock sales gone up as they establish their herd. Their milk sales are going up, and their costs. And I suppose that established one is a farm in the west there. It's actually a Reaver supplier. He's a Jersey crossbreed, like, and I suppose he's shown the potential of where to get there, like. And I mean, if you look at those new entrant group there, they're 3 to 5 years, they're above average, if you know what I mean. So they're already within 5 years of a profitability above the average farmer, like. So like, I mean, the money is there, like, I mean, and it goes back to those first slides. Why? Like, the profitability is in the system if it's done right, if you know what I mean, and you can do it. We looked at it there as well. I did a quick figure there. Vinny asked me to do it there. We looked at what our new entrants on average spent per cow. So I pulled out about 30 to 40 of them, and we looked at the capital expenditure that they did in those first 2 years, and it was averaging a little over 1,500 euros per cow, like. So you're talking about a guy with 100 cows making investment of 150,000 euros, like. So what I'm actually going doing leading on from this is I'm going to start tracking what the capital investment on those 3 to 5 year farmers were over the full 5 years. So in other words, what investments they made year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In other words, to get to that end point, to see how much it's going to be like when you're all said and done. You have the sheds, the cubicles, the parlours, the whole lot. So while it all might be done in year 1, it'll be a figure I'm going to analyse and look at now to see what the long-term investment would be on a new entrant farm.
Okay, we look forward to seeing that, Philip. Dara, a quick question in here for you. Where are you based?
I'm in Aircourt in County Galway, so we're kind of, our farm is nearly along the River Shannon, so that's where a lot of our outside ground is, and the home farm is just away from that then.
Okay, we're 3 minutes to 11. I was going to do 3 top tips, but I'm going to do your 1 or 2 top tips. So look at nice and tight. We'll go from Dara up the page. Dara, Noreen, Vincent, and lastly Philip. So Dara, shoot away.
Yeah, I had a good few, but I'll leave them to the rest of them.
Well, maybe Dara, like, yours are probably more pertinent than anybody else's here, so you can talk away, but the rest of the one tip each. So Dara, you talk away.
Well, I would say buy the best stock you can, and even if it's €100 deer, like, it's so different to €100 on a beef animal. I would say buy the absolute best stock you can buy with your money, and if it means buying a few less, buy a few less and buy better. You'll breed them up straight away. I would say take your time on your planning and have all of that right, and have solid drawings for your builder and all of that thing, because it just rules out mistakes. And the rest of it then is just down to structure, solid business plan, and solid relationships with your bank, your accountant, all of them. So a lot of it is about your relationships with people as well as much as anything else. That's about it, really.
Brilliant. Noreen, 1 top tip.
Revisit your business plan. It's great to say you have your business plan done at the start and you've got your bank approval and your money is sitting in the bank account, but keep revisiting it, whether it's on a monthly or a quarterly basis. It needs to be live and needs to be updated throughout the year. If there's changes or fluctuations in milk price, or maybe as things happen on the farm, keep it live.
Vincent.
Good cost control in the conversion process. Be very clear about what, I think Dara said, what you must have and what you'd like to have. Like, that's really, really important, because there's no blank checks. So good cost control, and focus on the areas that you have to have that have a high return.
Philip, I hope you still have 1 at least top tip left after that.
Thanks, David. Did I do something that you came to me last? No, look, they've covered the main ones. I suppose, look, at the end of the day, from my own perspective, we're an accountancy firm. So, look, tax and structure, it is important, if you know what I mean. The business has to work for the people who are running the business, for the family, and it's often 2 generations. So it's back into that overriding picture, looking at succession and where the business needs to go to. And like, succession is an evolving process. It doesn't happen, it can take years, but in other words, having that overriding picture of where you want to go as a family and the business, and having that right structure in place to allow you grow the business, inherit the business, change the business, whatever it need to be. So having that right structure in place for that.
Thank you. Okay, guys, it's 11 o'clock. Thanks to Philip, Vincent, Noreen. Special thank you to you, Dara, for sharing your advice. It's been a massive journey for you. You seem to have done it exceptionally well. So fair play for sharing it with our audience today. And to the audience, the best luck in your dairy career. Thank you and safe farming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, David.